Okay, we should be live. Is everybody awake out there? You guys all turned in? Welcome to ACAB Radio, changing hearts and minds, one listener at a time. We're presented by Nevada CopBlock and Food Not Bombs Las Vegas. Be sure to check out the websites at nvcopblock.org and foodnotbombslasvegas.org. We're podcasting live from Happy Earth Market, and you could visit them at happyearthmarket.com and see all their community building activities and events. We're your hosts, Jay Leifer, Special K, and me, I'm King Ron. On with the show.
All right, I think we wanted to get into the Junior Lopez case, which is Metro's most recent murder.
Of an unarmed, more or less.
Yeah, he had his own firearm, but he didn't. It wasn't like how they reported. They said that an armed motorist confronted them and pointed it at them. But when you review the body cam footage, you see when he was ordered out of the car, he threw the gun on the ground and got on his knees, complied with the orders, and so he wasn't.
Yeah,
he wasn't
armed.
Well, I think it's kind of fair to say he was armed. In the sense that there was a weapon there.
Okay.
And he had possession of it at some point. So, I mean, you could get into a lot of arguments about whether he's armed or not, and it's not worth really having that argument in that sense. But the thing about it is, like you said, their YouTube video is titled "Armed Motorist Confronts Officers," and there's very little true about that because they pulled him over. I mean, if anybody confronted anybody, it was them, obviously. And when you watch the video, which their description also says he picked up the gun and pointed it at them. Mm-hmm. And when you watch the video, that never happened. Right. And what really happened and what you can see in the video, and there is body cam video where you can see that, and they also, at the end of the body cam video of one of the officers, whose name is Officer Mills, they slow it down, and you can see it in live action. It's clear enough that you don't even need it slowed down, but when you watch it slowed down, it's really clear. He pushes the gun away from himself, and he's on his knees at the time. Prior to that, he had his hands up in the air. So he's not picking the gun up. That's incredibly obvious. It's never in his hand from the time that he drops it.
And he complies continuously through
and
the video.
The other thing is they also say as he got out, he dropped the gun, and that's not what really happened either. He threw the gun down.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like he just got out and, was fumbling with it and it fell out of his hand. He puts the gun on the ground intentionally.
And the way that Metro tried to spin it is more or less that it was a suicide by cop. And to me, it's obvious that that's not the case. If he wanted to either hurt the officers or get himself shot, he would have kept the gun in his hand when he got out of the vehicle. Now, another conflicting thing is the witnesses, his girlfriend and the friend that were in the car, say that an important part of the story that was left out by Metro is that he was ordered out of the car. Now, where the body cam picks up, where it starts at, is him getting out of the car, and they're saying, "What are you doing getting out of the car? Get back in the car." So, it's them escalating the situation. Get out of the car, get back in the car.
Which they do all the time.
Yeah.
Well, the different cops give conflicting orders, and then when you don't obey one, they feel justified.
Well, the families actually stated that they believe the video was altered and that it was edited with the audio changed. And part of that is on the video you can hear he says, "Shoot me," in the video that they posted. They say that he actually said, "Don't shoot me." So they're saying they edited out the part where he says "don't." And the other thing about that is in the beginning, normally it takes 30 seconds from the time you start the body cam, in which the cops actually have to manually start them. They don't start on their own. It's not like a dash cam where it starts when you turn the lights on. So there is a 30-second delay of the sound for some reason. I don't know why they can't like fix that, but and so you don't hear the initial part of it. But the thing is, when the video starts, they're already outside the car pointing their guns at him. And typically when you see a body cam video that gets released, you'll actually see the cop driving in his car heading to where he's going. And part of their statement was that these two officers were heading to another call. So it's not like, it happened really quickly. They were already headed to another call. So I would expect that you would see that. You would see them actually driving. And as I said, they have to manually turn the videos on. So if they're standing outside with the guns already pointed, like at what point do they stop and worry about turning the camera on? That seems really something that's like out of the ordinary.
And the way the body cams work is once they hit record, the audio starts and the video goes back 30 seconds before they hit record. Yeah. So it doesn't make sense. It makes more sense to me that they would have edited it to mute 30 seconds, in their favor so that you don't hear the order given to get out of the vehicle. And then just the whole him saying shoot me makes no sense to me, because if you are trying to get shot by a cop, you simply have the gun in your hand.
And there was no indication there was, that he was in distress
or suicidal.
Or suicidal. And he was with his sister and the friend.
He wasn't acting hostile during the thing. He was on his knees with his hands up in the air. And on top of that, 2 days before he got shot, he went down and took the written test to apply to be a member of the LVMPD.
Yeah, that's
so he was trying to join join Metro.
Right.
So that doesn't really point to somebody who's like an enemy of the police, or
Yeah, they essentially killed one of their own, or someone aspiring to be an officer, and
who wasn't in any way what they might consider anti-police.
No, not at all.
He was a supporter and compliant.
When you watch a press conference, that's also kind of telling, because normally they give that laundry list of stuff that they dug up from 20 years ago about the person and make them look bad. And there's one really minor offense that he had, and that's also something that's like from 20 years ago. But there's very little like history that they can bring up on him, because obviously he's somebody, if they're accepting him to join as a cop, that means they did a background check on him and stuff. So he should be pretty clean by that point, by the time they're having him come in to take tests and everything. So it's not somebody with a long history of crime. It's not somebody that has something against the cops. And they had just moved into a house. He was with his fiance at the time, so there's no real indication that he's like depressed or anything.
No, they were even set to be married, I believe. I think the following month, or some very, very close to the shooting, they had planned to get married. So yeah, nothing to indicate he was suicidal or anything like that. If anything, he had his whole future ahead of him.
And he was planning for it. He was planning for a future.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the other things I noticed on the press conference is that the way, like in Vegas, the media is just hand in hand with the cops, and sometimes it's really obvious. Sometimes you'll read what Metro puts out as a press release, and you'll read the newspaper accounts, and it's almost word for word the same thing.
Yeah, like they copy and paste it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one of the things I noticed is toward the end of the press conference, one of the reporters says, "Can you play the side-by-side view?" And then after that, one of the other reporters brings up the suicide by cop thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like ththese reporters are like
asking
pitching out questions to help like them
write their narrative.
Scenario.
Exactly. Yeah. Like they were.
And like, why did they know about this side-by-side video before the press conference?
Yeah, it was already queued up to play that way. Yeah, exactly.
And the other important thing about that, about them alleging that the video was altered, that's not an isolated incident in Vegas Or
Yeah,
at
it's
least
not it's not unprecedented.
in the Vegas area.
Right. There was a case.
In Boulder City, there was a case where there was a person who was arrested because they were doing one of those revenue generation things where they were going out and walking through the crosswalk, but they were making sure the cars didn't really have enough time to stop, and then they were ticketing people based on the fact that they didn't stop soon enough. So the Boulder City Police were out there, and they were also doing it with the Nevada Highway Patrol. And one of the persons who got a citation came back and started walking through the crosswalk himself. And he says it was basically a protest against what they were doing. And it was also to illustrate that if you walked across within the certain amount of time, the cars would be able to stop. But so they arrested him for obstruction, and they also charged him with resisting arrest. They went back, and Boulder City has dash cams, and also the Nevada Highway Patrol has dash cams in their cars. So when they got the discovery, they've got the dash cams from the Boulder City Police, and there was audio on there where basically he was refusing to follow commands from the officer. And the guy's name is John Hunt, and it's a story that's on Nevada CopBlock. But he was saying, I remember saying that stuff, but I don't remember saying it at that time. So basically, he was questioning the officer, but he wasn't refusing to follow his commands. And so what they did is they took and spliced that video or that audio into a different portion of the video to make it sound like he was refusing to follow orders. And they went and did a forensic analysis through an audio expert, and they proved that you could see at the point where that was spliced in, you could see where the audio dropped and then went back up. So they had testimony from that expert that it had been altered. And then the other thing is when they've got the discovery from the Nevada Highway Patrol, that same portion of video that they both had from different angles did not include that audio in it. So you could see that they obviously put the audio in. So for them to go in and edit one word out is not something that would be that hard to do.
And it's
And
certainly
they have practice doing it.
Yeah, certainly not something you would put past them. Like I could see cop supporters saying, "Oh, they would never do that," but here's a recent case where they did just that, and it was caught in court. So I really hope that the family of Junior Lopez gets a good lawyer who can possibly reach out to forensic analysts and get that video and the audio looked at, analyzed for sure.
And even you can hear on that video they do say, like, get back in the car, but if they're taking stuff out and putting stuff in, then it's not that outrageous that they went ahead and put in, get back in the car to support their
Narrative.
their scenario of that.
Another thing about the body cams is one officer clearly, purposefully, the way he's holding his firearm is blocking the camera so that he had the clearest view of Junior Lopez and deliberately obviously blocked the view from the camera so that you can't see exactly what was going on.
Well, the way they do that is they put the body cam on their shoulder, and some of them also have it on their glasses. They're like a little clip-on the side. And I don't think it's necessarily that officer was purposely doing that, but I would not be at all surprised if Metro has it set up that way because they know that it obstructs it. So when they're holding their hands out with the gun and they're aiming, the gun's in the way.
Well, to be honest, I mean, with the dash cams, it's not unknown that police will, open hoods or trunks to obscure video.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, they have obscured video in the past. So,
but they could easily, first of all, they could take and put it on the gun itself. So they could mount a camera on the guns. They have some tasers that have that. So it's not something they couldn't solve.
Correct.
They could put it. It could be wrist mounted. It could be there's several different options they could use where you could actually see, but I don't doubt that they want to take advantage of the fact that you can't always see it.
Yeah. One thing you can see, though, is when he's ordered out of the car, throws his hat and the gun on the ground, gets on his knees, has his hands up. They're saying he's saying, shoot me. Witnesses are saying he's saying, don't shoot me. And the gun is pretty close to him. It's within arm's reach. So it makes more sense to me that he's saying, don't shoot me, and goes to push the gun further away. Like he's letting them know, look, don't shoot me. Don't shoot me. I'm going to push this gun away so that you don't think, so I don't get shot. So you don't think I'm, a threat to you. So he goes to push the gun away. His hand comes up completely empty, and that's when the shots ring out. So if he was reaching for the firearm, his hand would have came up with the gun in it, or he would have got shot while his hand was on the gun or something. None of that happened. So.
It's also not one of those things where it's like, oh, it was a split-second thing, and they saw him reach toward the gun, so they shot him. His hand goes, he pushes the gun, and then his hand follows through all the way to where it's up. Mm-hmm. So it's not, it's a fraction of a second, but it's enough time. It's not like they saw him reach and they shot. There's a lapse of time between that.
So he struck a couple times. Then he's laying on his back, and he's bleeding out. He's dying.
And he's rolling. Yeah.
And so he rolls in pain, and that's when you say, don't reach for the fucking gun, and they both shoot into him, several more bullets. And you can clearly see he's not reaching for the firearm. He's moving in pain. He's shot a couple times. So, yeah, it's just I don't know if it was just these officers out for a paid vacation, or it could be I read that they were both rookies. They had like less than 3 years experience between the two of them. Each one had like a year or two. So it could just be, inexperienced, poor training, or it could be, get out of the car, get in the car. Maybe that is indicative of them. They just wanted to kill somebody.
Well, like I said, I don't give them any excuse. They have the right to use deadly force. That's one of the things that they're able to do. So inexperience or poor training just doesn't cut it. When you have that kind of power and can exercise that kind of power, you're held to a higher standard. So there is no excuses when you do this. That's
I
how
think
I
that
feel
needs.
about it. So
I think that definitely is a good point to bring up, because they do need to be held to a higher standard. I mean, maybe change the rules of engagement. I know the military, they don't shoot unless fired upon, but police don't have to follow that, and that's why we have so many police killings in the nation.
It could all go back to their training. I mean, their training is no matter what happens, you come home at the end of your shift. Mm-hmm. You do what you need to do to survive and live.
They are literally trained, shoot first, and ask questions. And the problem with that is the way the police system and the way the supposed investigations conducted by the police departments are, nobody's actually asking questions later. Mm-hmm. There are no questions. They just exonerate the police.
Look, we investigated ourselves, and we found that we committed no wrongdoing. Yeah.
So
definitely feel for their family. I know that Nisa, who we had on last week, put on a couple events. The community really came together. There was a car wash, some other things to help raise funds to cover the funeral costs. Meanwhile, the officers are on a paid vacation. Definitely check out Nevada CopBlock. Kelly released an article today about the Junior Lopez shooting. ForceTrajectory.com. There's also a good article on there. Fox News even covered it. Adam Hurwitz actually did a pretty good job. I mean, I've been impressed with his work lately involving the 1 October shooting and just calling out Metro in general. He's done a pretty good job. So there's an article on Fox 5 as well. And then if you want to see the actual video, did you link the video?
The article, which is linked into the ACAB web or Facebook page, is I think it's the previous post to this, has all of the body cam videos.
Okay.
And it actually has a press conference also.
Wow.
It also has a link to the Force Trajectory Project article.
Okay. Nice. While we're on Nevada CopBlock articles, I saw that you did that there was an article posted about Ademo's sentencing. Want to talk about that? Ademo is the founder of CopBlock.
Yeah, the co-founder to be
Co-founder.
to be technically correct, but that was actually the article was actually written by Deo, who's in Cleveland, and it was just about his sentencing. And Ademo was sentenced. He took a plea deal actually, but he was sentenced to 9 months. He has to do 7 months because he already got credit for the time that he was in after he was actually arrested. And
It's for marijuana possession, right?
I'm not sure what actual charge he agreed to plead to, but possession was one of the charges that he was charged with. I know they had I think intent to, I don't know exactly what they call it in Ohio, but it was like intent to distribute. And the thing about that is those charges, they don't actually catch you selling drugs.
No.
Those are based on how much you have, and they say, well, if you have this certain amount, that means that it's not for personal use. You're selling it.
No, it was my understanding that he was moving or something, so he had all of his belongings with him, and he's arguing that the only reason he had that much on him was because he was moving everything from his house. So that's his, whether it's for medicinal purposes or recreation, really none of that, the amount shouldn't matter. I mean, it's his own body. If you believe in self-ownership, then who is the state to come in and tell you what you can and can't put into your body? Basically, that's the state saying, we own you. You can't put this into your body because we own you. So if you own yourself, you should be able to make those choices voluntarily. And it's a victimless crime, so.
Well, that's one of the things is one of the kind of the themes of the article is that Ohio just has medical marijuana, and they are expected to be another state that's going to pass the actual full legalization, which, knowing Ohio, I don't know how they're so sure about that, but so they're expecting that it's at least going to be on the ballot in the next election, and it was on the ballot in the last election, but it was defeated. But so the thing about it is they're saying Ademo is a medical patient, and he had his medical marijuana card from Colorado, but because it's from Colorado, it doesn't count for Ohio, and it's silly that they're charging him for that. But the thing about that is, I think that's, you do what you have to do. Like if you're in court, you argue the legal technicalities, and that's not a bad argument to make. But the reality is, nobody should be doing a day in jail or a minute in jail for pot, because it's just silly. And pot is something that nobody has ever OD'd from it. The studies they've done, they've said it's basically humanly impossible to do enough pot, to smoke enough marijuana within the time frame that you would need to OD. So it's really a harmless drug, and there's also a lot of stuff where they've come out with health benefits that marijuana has. So you're drugs in general, you're only really harming yourself, the actual act of doing the drug, and all the periphery things about like robberies and to get funding for drugs and all that, that's a separate thing that there's already a law against. And those are also, the war on drugs creates a lot of that, or at the very least intensifies it.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the whole war on drugs wasn't about the drugs.
No.
It was about targeting specific communities.
The anti-war activists and the black community, Hispanics.
Right, and that was from the beginning.
So realistically, I mean, marijuana is safer than alcohol. It's safer than cigarettes, and you can walk down the street with a pack of a 6-pack of PBR in your thing, and a pack of cigarettes in your pocket, and it's not a big deal. But if they, everywhere else, if they catch you with some pot in your pocket, then it's a big deal, and you have to go to jail.
And there's still people serving basically life sentences for, under the repeat offender laws.
Yeah, 3
they
strikes
have.
in California, and it's
Yeah.
a weed offense. I mean, the people I really feel for is, in Nevada or Colorado or Washington, California now, people that are in jail or prison for marijuana-related offenses, and now it's legal. So it's like it's legal now, and I'm still here in prison. Like,
One, it's
they should
also
be
set
released.
up so that all those cops that were out busting people and making money off of the war on drugs, because that's what the war on drugs does, is it allows for asset forfeiture and
Right.
those other things that the cops make money off of.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're out there running the dispensaries and
Fighting security.
Yeah,
And
so now they're profiting off it being legal when they used to profit off it being illegal.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. That's brings up a greater issue, that everything that our country declares war on, whether it's war on terror, war on drugs, is something that there's money in it. There's no war on homelessness because there's no money in it. You know what I mean? There's a war on drugs so that there's for-profit prisons, there's police and drug testing. There's a whole industry created out of this war on drugs. And the war on terror, there's the weapons manufacturers, weapons contractors, defense contractors. So there's money in it, there's no money in a war on the homelessness. So instead they have
the war on poverty.
Yeah.
Poor people just don't count because they can't generate enough revenue from somebody who doesn't have anything.
Yeah.
I mean they filter them through the prison industrial complex. So they really, they need these people in order to feed the system, and they need to keep them poor so they can't defend themselves.
Yeah, well, I mean, they can't profit off homeless people just being homeless, but they do put them in prison, and they do use what's essentially modern day slavery in the prisons to. People used to complain about China and all the cheap stuff that the prisoners made there, but I mean, it's the same situation in the United States at this point, if not worse.
Yeah.
The furniture manufacturing industry in prison. I mean, this is brand name furniture. You're paying, I'm not sure what the hourly wage is in prison, but it's like 25 or 33 cents an hour or something akin to that. And these major furniture manufacturers are going out and you're paying $800 for a couch that was produced by somebody who wasn't even paid minimum wage and doesn't really have a choice in whether they work. I mean, they could always refuse, but I'm sure there's some sort of repercussions if you don't participate in that work system.
Yeah, the way it works here in Nevada, I'm not too sure about the details in other states, but here in Nevada they have fire camps where you work with BLM and NDF, Bureau of Land Management, and Nevada Department of Forestry, and you go out and fight fires. But, most of the time there's no fires, so you end up working for either rich farmers or cattle owners, and you put up fencing along highways so that the cattle don't go into the street. So you're basically doing the work for them, and each inmate gets paid $1 a day, and they take out a percentage of that. So it's actually less than $1 a day. And when you're fighting fires, I think it was $1 an hour that you're fighting fires, and you're literally putting your life on the line. So that's just the way for the government to get cheap labor out of you.
Yeah, well, the government and corporations and businesses and private industry.
Well, and it's a larger issue, but if you look into the 13th Amendment and people that have been talking about the 13th Amendment, there's a lot of research that's been done that shows that that was an intentional thing. Once slavery ended, they found another way. And when it initially started, it was essentially a way of taking the people that used to be slaves and instead of freeing them, turning them back into slaves through the judicial system and the prisons.
Mm-hmm.
Which they did the same work that they were doing.
Yeah, in cotton fields and
while they were enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
They turned and that happened at the same time that they,
And then
Made
they've
slavery
expanded
illegal.
it, because if you can do it to the black people who used to be slaves, then why can't you do it to everybody? You know, because I mean that really opens it up, because of the the way they needed to rationalize slavery, they made it a race-based issue. But you don't need to do that with prison, because you can use the offenses that people have committed to justify it instead.
Yeah.
So we wanted to give an unauthorized shout out to Ademo, and hope that his time passes fast and he's good and gets out and it's back to being what he needs to do.
Yep. Free Ademo.
Free Ademo.
Free Ahed Tamimi. Yeah, I saw some.
There was another.
I saw some footage of her. They released footage from her interrogation, and she didn't say anything. She remained silent, and that's always a good code to live by. So yeah, definitely. I think she got sentenced to under a year.
Yeah, you should probably explain who she is for the people that don't know.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with Ahed Tamimi, she slapped a IDF soldier, and no charges were brought initially, but they ended up coming back and raiding her house and arresting her. And since that's happened, they killed one of her cousins. But what sparked it all is these soldiers shot, I believe it was either her brother or her cousin, in the face with a rubber bullet and really messed him up. So she was very emotional.
Just so everybody realizes, rubber bullets aren't rubber. They're not airsoft rifle bullets. These are steel pellets that are wrapped in rubber.
Mm-hmm.
So there's steel behind that rubber when you get shot with it. They're very deadly. We've had instances here during protests where the police have used them, and in other countries they use them to devastating effect. Break bones, make holes, and kill.
Well, and the other thing they do is the intention of the rubber bullets is you shoot them toward the ground and they bounce, and that basically is supposed to disperse people without causing major injuries.
Yeah, you don't go for a headshot.
That's what the police
And
do,
that's
is
what
they
they
shoot
do.
directly at people.
Yeah.
So, using the term rubber bullet, people think that it's some benign type of, but what's the word? The non-lethal force. They talk about non-lethal weapons, and this is far, far from that.
While we're on Israel and Palestine, I don't know if our viewers have been following, but the March of Return that's been going on in Gaza, and there were like almost 20 unarmed protesters that were killed by Israeli soldiers. One soldier even videotaped it. Like, you can look through his sniper rifle and see him shooting someone, and then they, celebrated him and his buddies, celebrating that they actually shot the guy, and they killed journalists that had press, vests on. A journalist was killed. Over 100 people wounded. They were given orders to shoot to kill, and these are unarmed protesters. When you see the video, it's just they're just standing there. There's no way anybody was a threat to anyone.
And well, let me bring this point up. Maybe some of the people out there are not interested. This isn't in the United States. This is a foreign nation. However, we are tied to this issue. I think we were going to bring that up.
Yeah, what we were going to get into is controversial protest tactics and controversial police tactics. So that's.
Well, I was meaning that the police departments are there.
They have a program where they send American police over to Israel to train with the IDF.
Yeah, it's like cross training. They teach us things. We teach, not we, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Right. So it does everything that does happen within the world. I mean, affects everybody and does come back to us. So this is a big issue and an important issue, no matter where you stand on it. Whether you're not interested in what goes on in the rest of the world, and you're just interested in what happens here. What happens out there comes back here, and with devastating effect.
Yep, Metro is involved in that program, training with Israel, and there's actually going to be a protest. Jewish Voices for Peace out here in Vegas is doing a protest against the ADL Hypocrisy, which is the Anti-Defamation League. At the end of the show, I'll let you know the date and time and place. But yeah, if you guys want to get into controversial protest tactics, I know we talked about Junior Lopez shooting. There was the Stephon Clark shooting in Sacramento, and there were protesters blocking freeways, and that's something that lately is really taken away from what people are protesting. Instead of focusing on why they're protesting, people are focusing on how they're protesting, whether it's Kaepernick or it's it really draws from the issues at hand.
However you protest, they still say it's wrong.
Yeah.
Right. It's wrong to kneel at a football game, and it's wrong to block streets. It's wrong to inconvenience anybody in any way, even though, like, how are you going to get your point across if you don't get noticed? So, but that's just something that they trot out there is like, oh, well, they're doing it wrong. But everything you do is wrong. Right. If you write somebody a letter, then, it's wrong because you use red ink.
And the blocking of the streets, I mean, I've seen protests where that's happened, and, of course, it's always online. And you can read the comments. And a lot of the comments, I mean, I've seen them myself. I would run them over. And it has happened. People are so wrapped up in their own lives at the moment that they don't want to look out for their brothers and sisters and see what the actual problem is. Why are the people out there? And
meanwhile, nobody complains when they have one of those marathons downtown and they block the streets. I don't know what those guys are protesting about, but
or the road rally.
Nobody complains about them blocking the streets. Or Zappos taking over downtown for a whole week and shutting everybody's internet down, in downtown area.
That's for sure.
The other controversial protest tactic is wearing masks. Recently in Georgia, there was footage that came out from a neo-Nazi counter-protest. So these are Nazis preaching, genocidal hate speech. And instead of focusing on that, there's people focusing on, whether it's Antifa or, the police go after these counter-protesters.
They were militarized police officers. I mean, the video's out there.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Out there to protect the neo-Nazis.
Yeah, Nazis protecting Nazis. Yeah.
No, I don't know. What I always say is I don't quite understand it. I know that I had family who was trained by the government and given guns by the government to eliminate Nazis. They were trained and paid to get rid of Nazis, and now we're here protecting them. I don't understand the change.
We literally fought a world war over this.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, I mean,
so
in Philadelphia, there was a cop who had Nazi tattoos on his arms.
Oh, that's
and he was
right.
wearing short sleeves so to make sure everybody could see it during a protest. And after his picture was taken, they started an investigation of it with the internal affairs, and they came back and said, it's not against policy to have Nazi tattoos.
Yeah.
Not surprised. Not surprised.
So that's a big part of why. It's because they recognize some of those people. It's like that Spider-Man meme, really pointing at each other.
I'm just saying, I've seen protests with Klan members here in Las Vegas where
they called them gentlemen the next day.
Yeah,
in the paper.
Exactly. So
the cops referred to the KKK members as gentlemen.
Like, here's my issue with it. Like, what's more dangerous, somebody wearing a mask or somebody preaching genocide, and spouting hate speech? Somebody,
Well, I don't see what the problem is with wearing a mask. I mean, if you want to go, you could bring it out. If somebody's wearing a burqa, which covers their face, would that give them a right to come in and rip it off their face?
Yeah.
It's, there's a real problem. And why shouldn't I be able to wear a mask?
There's also a video of that, and I'm pretty sure it's the same protest. But there was a black guy walking across the street, and the cops stopped him and basically said, you have to walk with these guys. And it's the protest with all these white supremacists. They basically told him, you have to join these guys and walk because, you're not allowed to walk across the street like that. And he was like, screw that. And they ended up arresting him, and there's a video of him basically being beat for not joining a white supremacist march.
Which I'm sure is delightful to the white supremacists out there.
Because they couldn't wait until, they walked past. They had
Exactly.
to make sure he joins in with them.
So I read some of the comments on that video in Georgia of the neo-Nazi counter-protest, and it's the same thing. It's basically Nazi sympathizers bringing up the First Amendment. These people have a right to say what they want to say, but the question I pose to them is, like, where I get that it's a slippery slope and you should be able, free speech should be protected, but what if it's ISIS holding recruitment outside of a mall? Are they protected by free speech? Should they be allowed to recruit,
They would be called
outside
domestic. They're terrorists.
Yeah.
And we have domestic terrorists here, and the majority of them
Well, I mean, the
are
military can go into schools and recruit, soldiers. So that's a free speech thing. What about NAMBLA? What if some little kid fuckers are at the park and they want to preach, it's okay to have sex with kids, and I'm at the park with my son. Is he protected by free speech? You know what I mean? Like, do you really want this kind of language and discussion going on? At what point are you allowed to say, no, shut the fuck up, I don't want to hear this shit?
Well, the point should be, I mean, if you should be able to say whatever you need, right? Unless you're advocating violence against another group, and this is exactly what Nazis do. This is
the other part about that, though, is that they're not just not letting people attack the Nazis, which you can argue. First of all, that First Amendment's the government, so the government. I'm not in favor of the government going out and rounding up people, even if they're Nazis. But the other thing about that, even if they're there just to make sure if there's a fight that it gets broken up or whatever, they're actively arresting people for bullshit reasons on behalf of the Nazis. They're arresting somebody for wearing a mask because they're opposing Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't the first time. And if you go back, you could find videos of other neo-Nazi rallies where the police actively help, the neo-Nazis get their point across, and they stand with them against people who say, we're not going to tolerate this. We don't want this type of behavior. We find it appalling.
And we've also had where you have protests and the cops try to tell you, you can't even have a pole on your sign, so you can't have a stick holding a sign because you might use it as a weapon. But go look at these Nazi rallies. They have, they have shields and they have fucking sticks in their hands and everything, and the cops aren't stopping them from doing that. So the cops just let them run free and do whatever the fuck they want.
Focus on the counter-protesters,
but,
exactly.
If you wear a mask and yell back at them, then they're going to arrest you.
Yeah. And then that's the other thing in the comments section is, well, they're Antifa. They deserve what they get, and it's just that smear campaign against Antifa.
Well,
but
what does Antifa stand for?
Well, here's the thing for me is
anti-fascist. I don't get it. If you're anti-fascist, that means you're pro-fascist.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, if you're at a protest because you counter-protesting Nazis, that doesn't make you Antifa. You know what I mean? They're lumping everybody together. Oh, they're a group. They're members of Antifa. But I mean, I would consider myself an anti-fascist. But I'm not Antifa. I don't. It's not like we all get together and have midnight meetings. And think about how we're gonna go and do these things. So what I'm saying, how do you lump everybody together as Antifa and they deserve everything they get coming?
I'm not sure I even understand the problem with Antifa. They're anti-fascist. They stand against fascism.
You would think every American would be an anti-fascist.
Well, that's what I'm saying. My family members were Purple Hearts, who are Antifa and paid by the government to eliminate Nazis.
Exactly. When we fought a world war over this, these people who fought against Nazis were heroes. But now, if you're in the streets standing up against Nazis at a rally, you're a piece of shit.
Well, no, that's
Nazi
white
sympathizers.
Right. It's white supremacists pushing forth an agenda to spin people's thoughts on what Antifa stands for and what it is.
So the other controversial protest tactics was chalking. Kelly's got some experience with this.
I'm kind of on the fence about this. Chalking is a horrible graffiti crime.
I did come across a pretty extensive crime scene at one of the schools this weekend, actually yesterday.
Dirty vandals.
I saw the video or the pictures. I was horrified.
I made sure that Lieutenant Mike Wallace of the LVMPD has plenty of pictures so that you can launch an investigation on that. But yeah, it was, there must have been 20 feet of chalk everywhere, and they're even on the walls, which,
No doubt there was a hopscotch.
right?
I don't understand how they allow that to happen.
Hopscotching without a permit is something that we really got to deal with. It's
These are
getting
real
out of
issues.
control.
Yeah. I'm glad they're out there protecting us.
Another recent development in the news, I know it wasn't here local, but activists in the UK were charged with terrorism when they blocked a plane from taking off. The plane was full of deportees, people that they were trying to deport out of the country, so that's another controversial protest tactic. But they're charging these activists with terrorism. And the reason I bring it up is since it was in the UK, that same thought path is being brought here to the U.S., where states are trying to pass bills, anti-protest laws, calling these protesters, economic terrorists. If you block a port, if you block a street, if you're protesting outside of a business, then you're an economic terrorist. And, it's unbelievable. But
Well, I mean, one of the things that the laws they've tried to pass here is they'll say like a corporation can sue people based on like money they lost. And it's one of those things where the actual wording is sort of benign. So it's basically if you disrupt it. But if you go and you set up a picket in front of a business, then they're going to lose money. So, you could get a lawyer in there to argue that they should be allowed to sue you for protesting.
Right, and this has always been a tried and true method of getting your point across. I mean, I don't know if anybody wants to bring up the Starbucks, the Starbucks case. I mean, the people were unhappy with what happened. They had to let the corporation know that they were not pleased at the treatment. The two individuals that were arrested
for waiting
being
for
black.
their friends. Yeah.
Well, I
For
mean,
being black. That's what it was. So there was no, violence done, but there was a protest and, a boycott. They were
That's what I'm
pushing
saying.
for.
So if we say
It's the way they learn.
if we say boycott Starbucks, are we economic terrorists because we promote?
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, how do
Well, you also, it's not even that subtle. I mean, if you go back to the sit-ins during the civil rights era, and really just going to like the Sears where they wouldn't allow people to sit at the bar, and people went and did that anyway. That right there, I mean, that's essentially the same thing. It's an extension of that. It's really anything you do, and even the bus boycotts. That's the whole point of that, is to hurt people economically that are in business, so they have an incentive not to discriminate against
As
people.
long as you're doing it peacefully, I mean, I don't see how you can be charged with as a terrorist. It's just doesn't make any sense to me. But
They do like to call people terrorists. They called Food Not Bombs terrorists. They actually said Food Not Bombs was more dangerous than terrorists because we could influence people's feelings and change legislation.
changing them, one listener at a time, folks. Just saying.
We could keep people from funding the wars. That's actually what they said, is that we could affect people's willingness to fund wars.
God forbid.
Hey, it looks like we're coming up on time. Is that correct?
5-0.
So that's some controversial protest tactics. There's some controversial police tactics, that we talked about as well. Some from the J20 protests, they're, kettling or corralling protesters. We talked about rubber bullets. But there's a lot of other technology that they imply.
Well, kettling, not that I know of has it been challenged, but the reality of that is it's an illegal detention. They block everybody in, so they're stuck in a certain area and they can't get out. And this isn't somebody who's outside of being at a protest that has necessarily committed a crime, which walking down the street as part of a march is not a crime.
And we're talking about there's also
It's not yet.
reporters, medics.
Right. So the thing they do is they block you in, and then they get people in a position where they try to get out, and then they arrest them for that. So they're creating a situation where they'll be able to force you to commit a crime. So
I haven't followed up on it, but I saw the what is it? ACLU has got some action going against what they did at J20 with the kettling and corralling. We talked about rubber bullets. There's sound cannons and rubber ball grenades, like they used at Standing Rock, where they almost blew that woman's arm off with the rubber ball grenades. CS gas,
which is against the Geneva Convention to use in war, but yet we can use it against our own people.
Yeah, think about Waco.
Think about that stuff. Yeah. You know, it's too cruel to use in war, but on a civilian population, it's all well and good.
Yeah. If you want to talk about cruel, Google, or I don't want to support Google, but do a search of active denial system, ADS. It's known as the pain ray, and they basically microwave you, and it's they have it at the LA County Jail, where they've been testing it for some time now, and it's basically a torture method. It came home from Iraq and Afghanistan. The soldiers used it there to break up protests outside of military installations, and now we have it in prisons here in the U.S., and basically it makes your skin feel like it's on fire because they're literally nuking you.
It's been used against protesters outside the prison system. I mean, the police use it. The police have access to militarized weapons, and if they have them, they use them. You know, nobody gets a toy and doesn't want to play with it, and they just can't wait. LRADs. You know, there's no reason for the police departments to be getting this equipment, especially on civilian populations. This weapons are used in war. They're used against soldiers. The people that they're using against are not soldiers. They're people who are unhappy and trying to make a statement. Most times, they're women and children, the elderly, handicapped,
or people fighting for their drinking supply. You know, Standing Rock, when they brought out that Humvee that had rocket launchers attached to it. You know, these are
real issue.
Weapons of war being used on the people, and even weapons that are banned in war, like tear gas, CS gas, that was used in Waco to such an extent that, you know, it blew, you know, caught fire and killed women and children. And
you know, I mean, when I was younger, and they would be on the news, we used to talk about nations like China and communist Russia, you know, being oppressive governments and harming their people. And now I see the news and everything. I saw that we used to talk about our enemies. We do to our own. Where are we going with this?
And they still talk about other countries. They still criticize other countries. Like when they criticize Egypt for shutting off the internet and for shutting off Twitter so that the activists couldn't organize out there, the revolutionaries. And within a month of that, they charged people in Pittsburgh during the economic summit that they were having out there for using Twitter to organize the protests that were going on at the Pittsburgh Pittsburgh State, or Penn State, actually, not Pittsburgh State, but it's in Pittsburgh. So. Or
the false flags in Syria, the chemical attacks. You know, they say, oh, Assad's using chemical weapons. Well, thankfully, Russia didn't drop bombs on us when the government used chemical weapons against, you know, U.S. citizens. So,
well, we're going. I think we're kind of getting close to our time. I mean, we should really mention upcoming events, because I mean, you know, we sit here and we talk about stuff, but there's actually things you could get out there and do. Watching the show is one of them, so we do appreciate that. You should watch it all the time.
You could actually watch a replay of the show during some of those events.
All right, so tomorrow there's an Earth Day fair. It's hosted by the UNLV Student Sustainability Council. It's tomorrow, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the UNLV PETA Plaza. There's a Facebook event for that. Fighting with Cecilia, one of our partners for May Day, the Reba Las Vegas Workers Center.
Are these shout-outs that we're doing now authorized or unauthorized?
Oh, always unauthorized.
We don't get authorization. We don't get permits.
So tomorrow at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Reba Las Vegas Workers Center, 1948 East Charleston Boulevard. They are trying to form a rapid response group, and it's going to be a meeting to support Cecilia Gomez and her family. She was released after mobilization by family and community. She was going to get deported, and people really pulled together and fought on her behalf and got her to be able to stay here. So they do great work over there at the Workers Center. Definitely want to plug them there and this event. So if that's something that interests you, also here at the Happy Earth Market this Saturday, poster and shirt creation party for GMO Free Vegas.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could see it right there. No bees left if we stay silent. We support.
Yep. So it's a march against Monsanto. Make signs and T-shirts and stuff. It's Saturday, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. here at the Happy Earth Market, 900 Karen Avenue. And then the protest we plugged earlier, protest ADL hypocrisy, put on by the Jewish Voices for Peace. It's at the Springs Preserve, 333 South Valley View Boulevard, this Sunday, 8:30 to 11:30 a.m. And then, of course, a week from today, we've got May Day.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't forget to, and that will be, a lot of events will be happening. We're going to have a climbing wall and a maypole and all sorts of fun stuff before.
And the maypole is going to be on top of the climbing wall, so you have to climb up the wall to get to the maypole.
And, let's not forget Mother's Day. There'll be a Mother's Day protest. Do we have the time?
Oh, yes. I don't...
That's kind of still being, it's to be determined, but
Well, then hold
soon as
Mother's
we
Day
know-
open. Yeah, please hold Mother's Day open for a very important memorial.
it's for Tashi Brown, Tashi Farmer Brown,
Correct.
who his mother found out that he was murdered by the police on Mother's Day.
Also, this Thursday, if you're available early in the morning, Officer LaPera, who murdered Tashi Brown, the grand jury is having their hearing this Thursday, and they're supposed to come up with a decision as to whether they're going to drop the charges or, proceed with it, or, who knows.
Well, what that actually is I assume they've already had that hearing with the grand jury, but they're supposed to report back to the court whether they indicted him or not, or held up the indictment.
Come down and show your support to that. These things are important. Become active. Even the little things can mean a whole lot, especially to the families who suffer, through these tragedies.
And then there is another podcast here. Is it the Hemp Podcast?
The Hemp Podcast.
What time is that and what days?
Yeah, I just hoping you guys could plug it and tag it when you do this.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
We can do it. I mean, you're live right now. You can do it.
We won't tell you now because it's a secret, but we're going to tag that.
No, most of the time we do Saturday shows, and our shows comes out every Monday.
Okay.
And yeah. But if you need podcast production or anything like that, hit us up at Hemp Podcast, which is, there you go.
Yeah, if you like what you see here, I mean, we didn't do this on our own.
Yeah. And you should support
Nathan
Happy
has
Earth
been doing-
Market so they don't close down and we have to do this in the parking lot.
And we will. We
Yeah.
will.
And
Also, an update on May Day. We're going to have, there's going to be a 20-foot float there.
Like an ice cream float?
No.
Damn, that's big.
nice.
And they're going to be
cow.
doing like
Everybody
a
gets their
play
own straw.
around it, so it
Yeah.
should be pretty cool.
Cool. I guess that'll be it. Thank you, everybody,
And
for
that
tuning
float's
in.
going to have a maypole on it also.
Yes.
It'll be a giant straw. So thank you all. Join us next week for another podcast.